Hello, welcome to Story Leader. My name is Tanya Taylor Rubinstein, and I'm so happy to welcome you here to my YouTube channel. I have been an explorer, an innovator, a creator, an artist. I like to say in the quantum field of story for about the last 30 years, probably in some way my entire life, even as a child. But I have worked as a solo performer, solo performance director, memoir coach, and created a transformational therapeutic monologue process for people to utilize their stories as a way to heal when going through trauma, illness, loss, grief. I had a book come out way back in 2002 called the Cancer Monologue Project. It was a series of monologues. Folks I facilitated with cancer. I worked with people and their stories, veterans who have become peace activists, Arab and Israeli teens at a peace camp, with caregiving organization, hospices, AIDS, HIV and AIDS community, mental health communities. And after all of these years of digging down so deep in terms of my relationship with the art form of story and what it can do, it has felt critical to me to become more visible and share my knowledge, particularly at this time on the planet. I'm making this video right now in January of 2020, and we are certainly collectively on the planet in a moment of both catastrophe and the opportunity for great awakening. So because of those reasons, I've decided to come on here and explore with you several times a week and really drill down to support you in writing your story, speaking your story. And first, that all begins with getting aligned with your own deeper story. One thing I've learned as a story worker over many years is there are various levels of story inside of each of us. There can be the narrative story, the narrative arc. Perhaps it follows a hero's journey or a heroine's journey. Perhaps it's not such a binary journey, but it is a cinematic and transformational journey where things happen. But I also explore the deeper realms of story. And I'm going to be teaching here, supporting you for those of you who are called to story work. The deeper realms of story have to do with the energetic stories you're carrying, the stories in your body, the ancestral stories, the stories of our ancestors and how we've actually carried those in our own DNA, and our own stories of spiritual awakening. Often in our stories, there's a thread of story that takes us back to our own tribal or indigenous natures. And we were all indigenous to place once. And what I mean by that is it connects us to our stories, to the earth herself, to the mother herself. So I welcome you to this space, to this community. This is called Story Leader because I'm here to help activate and empower you around your stories, but also to support you in leading with story. And what do I mean by leading with story? Being transparent, being intimate. I truly believe and know in every cell of my being and every experience that the medicine for this time in the collective culture, this moment of both crisis and opportunity in terms of leadership, has to do with us leading by being, and leading by being transparent. And what I know for sure is that we're all seeking intimacy, seeking connection. And there's no greater way to create connection than through telling our stories, through sharing our stories, through opening up our souls, our hearts, our life experiences, and sharing them with each other. And honestly, there's no greater gift. And I remember back when I was, back in 1997, I was 31 years old. And I performed my first solo show that I had written and directed. Now, I had met my one of my great teachers, inspirers, inspirations, mentors. I can't really say he was a formal teacher. He was an informal teacher, meaning we spoke about story quite a bit, but he inspired me deeply. And that was the late Spalding Gray, the storyteller who I actually met when I was 20 years old in college at the time in Boston, my theater department, before he was famous, but he was doing his solo shows. And from the time I met him until 11 years later, all I wanted to do was my first solo show, because I sat in that audience that night at the Brattle Street Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, watching this man, some of you may know Spalding's work, sitting at a desk, a wooden desk, much like I'm sitting at tonight, in a flannel shirt with a notebook that he opened up, sat down, looked out at us, and began to reveal intimate stories from his life, his struggles. He spoke about things that were very taboo then. They'd certainly been very taboo in my family. They'd been taboo in Spalding's family. He talked about his mother's suicide. He talked for his quest for a perfect moment. He talked about his sexuality in a very open and funny way, and going to Walden Pond to connect with the spirit of Thoreau. And the transmission I received from him as such a young woman, 20 years old, is the path I've been following since then. But I had wanted to do the solo show for 11 years, and I was so terrified. And even though I'd been an actor since I was a kid and had trained professionally at Carnegie Mellon and Emerson College and HB Studios, I was absolutely terrified to actually reveal my story, my vulnerabilities in my solo show. And about 2 days before the performance, I tried to cancel the whole thing because I didn't want to go out there. I was so terrified, and I met this wall of shame in myself. It was a wall of terror and a wall of shame. Some of it conditioned certainly from familial patterns of growing up in an environment on the East Coast, sort of the Washington, D.C. area, more conventional, and also family patterns of we don't share things with the neighbors. We don't speak our business. What will other people think? Lots of silence and secrecy, and very typical of the time, very typical of the kind of culture I grew up in, and that silencing and secrecy and shaming I've learned, I think transcends and shows up in every culture. And then if you're marginalized in any way in the dominant culture because of patriarchy and white supremacy, if you're a woman, that you're more marginalized, your voice than a man's voice. So there's a layer of secrecy, silence, and shaming, fear to move through. If you're a queer person, if you're a person of color, these are all layers then of suppression that are collective suppression. And these are the things that must be addressed in story work. Because if we don't find our way through those, you can be given all the free writing topics, all the improvisational topics in the world. But if you're repressed and suppressed in your soul, there's still this fear of speaking. And as long as we're suppressed and unable to actually fully connect and be transparent and intimate and speak what is considered unspeakable. And as a story worker, I don't believe any experience in the human domain is unspeakable. If it's a human experience and it's happened, if it's an experience that has happened on the earth and Mother Earth. If it's a direct experience, including experiences that have come from the spiritual dimensions that we've directly experienced, there's no story that should be taboo, and yet they are. So here at Story Leader, I'm going to be supporting you in your leadership, whether you're an artist, a writer, doing some kind of formal leadership, social justice worker, healer, or simply a human who wants to lead and speak without suppression. I will be working on the level of sharing videos about writing, about improv, about writing a book, a memoir, about writing and performing a solo show, about utilizing the therapeutic monologue process I've developed and utilized with so many folks who've been dealing with, many very challenging issues, grief and loss, illness, transition. And also, though, getting into the energetic stories and breaking through suppression so that you can speak and utilize your story to become sovereign, to become fully expressed, sovereign and actualized in alignment with the way you were designed, and speak the stories that are yours to speak, because we all need each other. This is how we change the world. This is how we awaken. This is how we learn empathy. This is how we lead, and this is how we love. So welcome to Story Leader, the YouTube channel. I'm so grateful to have you here with me and look forward to the sharings in the days to come.